All right, I'm here with Senor Mr. Juan Guzman, probably one of, if not the best referees in the United States. Is that a fair thing to say?
Wow, that's a big shoes to fill, but thank you for saying that, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at your history and your career, I mean, you got a pretty remarkable one. So I want to dive into that a little bit, but I would love to just kind of have like an open flow discussion, maybe about the game in general, but also about like youth refereeing and what you see and your role and all that. So, just for reference, can you kind of, I have it here in front of me, but I would love to, get your perspective and just kind of highlights of your career and what you've done with the game.
Yeah, I refereed professionally in Major League Soccer for about 10 years. I
Well,
was a FIFA referee at a very young age, and now I'm the state referee administrator here in Cal South in Southern California. And we're kind of
hmm
like the DMV. Every year, referees need to certify from the most recreational level to the professional level. And, we're in charge of the certification process for them and the continued education. But in a
right.
nutshell, I've been a referee since I was a young kid and I'm still here.
So it must be your passion. So can you tell me a little bit more, like about, I guess, the journey that you had to go through? Like, I was a kid, I refereed. I'm sure it's changed since I last refereed, but I was, I think, a grade eight. I'm sure that's not the same thing anymore, but can you kind of talk about like how the process works if people want to get to a higher level?
Yeah, it's not a race. It's more of a marathon, right? You
Mm,
start at a young age. You develop, first you're recruited, you develop into the youth matches that you have, some, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. And from there, you gain experience. I think that's the key is gain experience. And then from there, there's programs in your local area or in your state that you can be a part of. Usually, there are mentor
right.
programs for referees that are coming up.
hmm
And then you go and compete against other states. There's regional tournaments, national tournaments, similar to like a player,
Yeah.
where you're going through levels. There is licenses that you obtain through the years
hmm
until you get to the highest license, and then you're being seen by U.S. soccer scouts. Now pro has came into the picture, and there's pro administrators that go out and watch referees as well. And you become into this professional development program until you reach the top. It's kind of difficult now because they have a bargaining unit. So unless
mm
somebody really retires, it's kind of hard to bring a new person in. But with the growth of soccer now, with the increase of MLS teams, USL teams, there's way more opportunities than there were 20, 30 years ago. And I went through that. I got to experience the whole picture, and now a full circle as an administrator. Now I get to help those individuals that are trying to move up in rank and become better on the field.
Okay. So can you walk me through like, so you start with youth, like you said, like I see a lot of referees now, they have to do like adult matches, like say a UPSL or something. And then they probably, I'm guessing, go from there, get into college. And then if they get real lucky, they get to that pro pathway that you were kind of talking about. Is that, am I accurate with that statement or?
Yeah, the U.S. soccer doesn't. There are different organizations. So, NCAA or college, there's a
Mm,
different organization. It's just for college. There's no really advancement, but you do use those games for experience. The pathway through U.S. soccer is a little bit different. Where, like you said, the national organizations that take part in U.S. soccer, like you mentioned, UPSL.
hmm
There's other there like NISA. There's a lot of big national organizations that if you're starting to do those matches, they count towards your license requirement to upgrade. So people
right.
start upgrading and then they eventually get seen. Everybody gets seen, right? Eventually, once you get up the totem pole, and really everybody has an opportunity. Some people they're not told exactly where they fit and where they land, but eventually everybody really does get seen.
Okay. So it's just kind of like an open door policy almost in terms of like the scouting. If you're good enough, I mean, that's got to be the key thing, right? It's almost like football or soccer. You have to be good enough for you to be seen, but if you're good enough, you will be seen. Is that what you're
Right,
saying?
exactly. And there's people in the community, in the referee community, that they'll identify you and then they'll start reaching out to the people that they know. And that's really how the process is. Eventually, it becomes, up to chance. When it's luck a lot of the times, but you have to be prepared as well.
Mm.
But sometimes, you have a bad game and they saw you and that might burn you. But if you have a good game at the right moment and people are watching you, and the right person sees you and has that connection, then it's sky's the limit for you.
Right. So, talking about that, can you kind of break down, like I have here in front of me, you did Brazil versus Portugal at Gillette Stadium, you did Mexico versus Chile, you've done CONCACAF Champions League, US Open Cup, MLS All Star as a fourth official. You've also refereed Real Madrid, Manchester United, Club America, Aston Villa, Chivas de Guadalajara. Um, which one was your first game at that level, and what was that like?
Well, my first big game was my debut in MLS.
Mm,
That was in 2011. It was Columbus Crew in Kansas City. I
right.
was 23 years old. I was a young little pup. At that time they were looking for young referees, and I fit the bill, I guess, and they pushed me through. I really didn't have much experience in USL, so it was really literally from the amateur level into the professional level.
Well,
And in that time, it was a sink or swim, right? They had a lot of young referees that you see now that were part of that, that time. Armando Villarreal just did the center of the MLS Cup, and he was part of that original group that I was in.
mm,
And it was just, hey, we need new referees. The ones that are, have done, countless games are getting older and they're being pushed out because of age. And we need young, new talent. And really, around that time, there was about 10 of us. One of them is Ishmael Alfat that went to the World Cup. He was on the fourth official of Argentina, France,
wow.
and we're from that generation. And it was a sink or swim. That year, it went well for me as the first time I've ever been in those matches. In reality, I didn't even know it was a foul at that time because it's so fast, and you're coming from a different environment that I didn't even know it was a foul. The players would look at me, and I would think, okay, well they're looking at me for something, and I would blow the whistle, and then eventually you started learning again. At that level, at that pace, you've played professionally. It's a different level. Nothing can
Hmm.
prepare you for that. And once you're there, it's like starting all over again. Well,
Right.
for me, it was a cool experience, but it's not an easy one.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So you said you literally went from amateur level, and they said, "Hey, Juan, guess what? You're going into the pro level at MLS," and then boom, you went into you were a center, I'm assuming.
Right, correct.
Man.
I was a center referee. I was going through tournaments. There were academies, camps that U.S. Soccer did at that time
Hmm.
for referees, and they would compete against each other.
Yeah.
A lot of the MLS referees that you see now that are kind of in between the 30s and 40-year-olds, I was competing against them in a lot of tournaments. And leading up to it, that's basically the process that it was then. Now it's a little bit more professionalized because pro came in. But yeah, it was a sink or swim. We went in there, and luckily it worked out for me.
Right. So I want to highlight that point you've said twice now. Sink or swim. That's the same thing that I tell kids all the time here. I'm like, if you want to start getting to that higher level, it's ruthless like that. So I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, the ruthlessness. And could you kind of expand on like the sink or swim piece that you're talking about? Like, if you didn't have a good match that game, you were probably done at least at that level, or at least for a while. Is that what you're talking about, or is it something else?
That's exactly what it was in that time. You had a bigger pool because they were trying to find identify the people that they wanted to be there on a regular basis. And you would have a match, and if it didn't go well, it would be a year from now where you would get another opportunity, or they
Wow.
would send you down to USL or other events like the Nike friendlies, and you would have staff from US Soccer go and watch you, and you would have to build yourself up again, right, until they trusted you and you had the opportunity again. There was a lot of referees in that time that it happened to, and luckily, maybe they were crazy, but they saw something in me that they said, okay, we're going to invest the time.
Hmm. So do you think, like on that note, in terms of like making a mistake or not, like what are some common mistakes that you think referees made at that point? Is it like a confidence thing? Is it like they just they weren't up to the speed of the game? Like what were they missing or mistakes that they made that probably dropped them to a lower level?
I think to me, even now, it's the control of the match
Hmm.
and changing behaviors with your personality, not so much hiding behind the yellow card and red card,
Right.
right? Or the misconduct aspect. When you have a referee that's authoritative on the field, it doesn't really get you anywhere. A lot of people, are upset by the decisions, the way the person's carrying themselves, how they're responding to people. I now we train referees to try to get people on your side, get them in your pocket so they work for you, not against
Right.
you. And
Right.
that's really what the movement is now going forward, not only here in Southern California, but it's on a national basis.
Well, and it's interesting you said it because for sure, every time the referee blows a whistle, somebody's going to be upset. One side or the other will be upset, whether it's fans, whether it's the team, the coach. On one side or the other, it's always going to happen. So it's interesting. But what are some things that you think, like maybe some advice you give young referees when you talk about control? What advice could you give a young referee that maybe has aspirations to maybe get to your level, to implement in their journey to help control a match?
I think to me, there's opportunities from the get go, right? From when you first meet the coach and trying to gain that connection at that moment, I think is key. And then when you're in the game, the first signs of frustration, we need to go out there and deal with it. And dealing with it doesn't mean you're going to go out there and card everybody. It means, you see somebody frustrated, go over there and say a word to them. Hey,
Mm,
I might have missed that, or something where you sound human,
right.
right? And people can connect with you, and
Mm,
that transcends soccer. I think that's something that we need to do in our society as well, is when we see somebody that's frustrated or needs help, we should be the first ones to reach out, because you don't know where that person is, and what they could do if they're upset or angry. And the reaction when it boils over, I'm in my experience, there's been so many opportunities to try to change that or alter that
sure.
during that journey. And to me, I think that's where referees need to go and understand that we need to identify frustrations early.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you said that because I was at a tournament this past weekend. Yeah, this past weekend it was a super group match, so it's the top level of the tournament or whatever. I was a coach, and so the referee called something. So I was like, he's on the other side of the field. So I asked him a question like, "Hey, can you explain to me what the call is?" Runs over immediately, yellow card dissent. I was like, bro, I'm just trying to ask you like what, like to your point about the human aspect. Like, I'm like, just give me like what are we calling and just explain it to me because I'm not seeing what you saw. So I went up to him after the match and I'm like, hey, look, like you gave me a yellow card for dissent. Okay, I want to understand what I did wrong so I don't do it. I literally went up to him and said that, and my assistant coach was there. And he's like, no, you know it was dissent. I'm like, okay, dissent, cool. Just, I don't want to make the same mistake. So how did I approach you in a way that you didn't like it and just explain to me so that way this doesn't happen again? And the dude wouldn't answer it. So it's just like, I think those type of things, to your point, I think referees can make a great impact in that regard because you have a different perspective than I do. I'm on the sideline. I'm not in the middle of the field that you are. I'm just asking for, and I'm sure a lot of people have the same thing. Maybe we can do a better job of how we communicate. No problem. And I think this goes both ways. But it's like, if I'm asking you a question, just come answer my question. I might not agree with you because I saw something different than you, but at least just give me that reflection so I understand what I'm looking at from the sideline and I can get an understanding of your judgment. But then in my opinion, when something like that happens, I'm going, dude, this dude don't care. I'm like, he doesn't want to explain this. He's just getting his paycheck and he's walking out. And I understand referees make money. It's no problem. But I think that's a great point that you made. And is there a way that like the refereeing process helps educate not coaches referees in that process of how to actually interact as a human, or is it just get your badge and let's move on?
Yeah, I think that's what is a shortcoming from
Mm,
U.S. Soccer and their training program, not only to referees but to coaches, right? I think conflict resolution should be part of their training
right.
before to get certified as a coach or as a referee. I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to learn as referees what coaches go through, and coaches need to know what referees go through. And that
Right.
awareness, I think, is important. And what I found out is that we're too similar, but there's this wall that you just talked about. The referees have always been trained in the past, right? And some still are trained to
Mm-hmm.
ignore. And the problem with ignoring is that that person that's telling you something, they want their point to be heard. And
Sure.
what we're trying to push is to acknowledge, not accept, right? Because there's a fine line between somebody asking and somebody complaining. But I think what is important is referees need to start making people aware that they heard it,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged it, and then
Right.
move on. And if that coach can't move on, then it goes into dissent,
Right.
right?
There
But
you go.
the first line of action cannot be, okay, you said something and I'm going to card you. I think that's where people get upset and frustrated, and that referee goes home, right, and keeps doing this, and then somebody else is trying to do it the right way is the one that
Right.
actually gets hampered.
Mm-hmm. And that's how I felt because I'm like, dude, you're not. and it's not that we weren't going to see an agreement, right? You called something, I didn't agree with it, but just explain that process of what you saw, and that way I can at least understand it. So that way next time maybe I don't question the call or whatever it is. But it's interesting because I think it's the same thing too with coaches. Like I think coaches in this country, like I think the U.S. soccer pathway's gotten better for coaches, but and I actually told this to one of my coach educators recently. And I'm like, look, I don't feel like enough of the licensing helps educate coaches on how to deal with the actual environment that they're in. Sure,
Right.
it's great that you're being taught how to put it on the paper and how to transfer it to the field. That's awesome. But that's probably 10 to 15% of the battle. The battle is how do you deal with the parents? How do you communicate with the players? How do you deal with the environment that you're in? How do you deal with the referees? Like you're not taught any of that. And it's, the most important thing is we're talking about kids. We are impacting kids from having a good experience playing the match, and then we wonder why at 13 years old or whatever age the percentage is ridiculous that kids quit. They're no longer having fun, and it goes both ways. It's parents, it's coaches, and it's refs, and I think all three kind of tying together. And we all have a similar goal. We want kids to play football, but we're taking away that experience, in my opinion. So I don't know if there's something you want to add to that, but I just felt it's necessary to put that point out.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on on the nail, where the experience of whoever's playing, it's important, and you need to make sure that that experience is something where it's safe and
Mm-hmm.
fun, because if not, people don't want to participate. And
Right?
at the end of the day, every time we go out to a match, it should promote soccer and grow. That's really what you want it to do. But unfortunately, if you're not given the tools, or it's not something that's recommended, or it's not something that's mandated, at the end of the day, people end up doing things that they shouldn't. But if somebody doesn't know how to do something, or hasn't ever been taught, how could you deem them to be wrong? And I think that's what you're going at, is that we need the content to not be 20 years outdated. We need
Right?
the content for all the spectrum of what's
Mm-hmm.
on the field. We need it to be modern. And I think that's where, there's people that have trouble have trouble with understanding what goes on in the game. And at the end, you have problems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of it obviously stems from parents. So with, your role with SoCal as you said state administrator, right? That's correct.
Correct.
So how do you feel like we could actually impact educating parents from an aspect of like most of them don't know the rules. Most of them have never kicked a ball in their life, let alone above, let's say, high school soccer, which I don't know if you agree with me. I don't think high school is a high level. For 90% of the country, there's probably the 10 or so percent where you have like residential academies like an IMG. That's going to be higher level, but the average high school level is not high. And so, how do you think we can deal with that from a parental education perspective?
I think awareness is key. And sometimes we get so passionate about what's going on that we forget the bigger picture. So I think awareness, having campaigns to make people aware. I don't really like mandates and
Mm,
rules, because I feel like people try to circumvent them, or
yeah,
do everything in their power to get away with it. To me, I think it needs to be something where you empower people to actually be part of the solution,
right.
right? I do have something to say about referee abuse, and I know you're probably going to go towards that. But I've refereed since I was 11 years old. I'm going on 26 years that I've refereed. I've been out on the field,
Right.
and I don't really see a difference between when I first started, 20 some odd years ago,
Mm-hmm.
in abuse, than what is happening now. The problem that I think I see is with social media. Everything that's negative is highlighted times 20, and
Right.
everything that's positive is not the best thing to promote, because people don't
It's not.
yeah, it's not as good as a controversial story. So you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing all the worst things that could happen, and people videotape them, and they get likes, and that becomes the norm. But in
Mm,
reality, 90 something percent of the games that you see, everything's fine. There is no referee abuse, right? Or
right.
there's maybe complaints, but it doesn't get to that level,
Right.
right? So I think we need a movement where we actually we highlight all the great things that parents do, and then all the great things that they can do. And
Mm.
I think causing that awareness and giving them that empowerment, I think will make for better environments on the field.
So can you expand on that note about the can do? Can you talk about that briefly? Like what can a parent do better from a sideline perspective?
I think the getting outside themselves, and realizing that yes, you may be upset, but showing it or getting out of line. Maybe there could be a parent that is the level-headed one, and that's the one that says, "Hey, stop." You're making it terrible for the kids. They don't like you screaming from the sideline. There
Right.
has to be policing on your own or within your community or within your team that says, hey, there has to be somebody that's level headed there and sees the big picture. Because
Right.
sometimes when, like, I've had situations where I didn't realize that I was extra emotional,
Sure. Right.
because you're inside your head and you believe what you believe at that moment, whether it's true or not. It's your truth. So
Hmm.
to you it's true, right? What you saw to you is true, but this game has angles,
Hmm.
and one angle from one side is completely different from the other side. And
Right.
I think that awareness to parents, that you might have saw something, but there might be a doubt there, right? And because you don't have the best angle, you might not have the proper distance to
Right.
be able to see it because you're far
Hmm.
away. And I think that's something that needs to be made aware. And then at the end, the other one is, just how players make mistakes, referees make mistakes as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, and I see it all the time that, coaches and parents ask, I don't want to see that referee ever again. The problem with that is that, we have shortages. And are you able to take that place of that referee? And there's always an invitation to anybody that wants to become referees to do it. Every local association, it has new referee courses around the country. And, I think if you want to make a difference and you feel so empowered, then there's an opportunity for you to get on the field. What I've realized is, people say, wow, this was not as easy as it looked.
That is definitely true. It's not as easy as it looks. But one of the comments I wanted to make was regards to like, okay, you go to a tournament. Usually, the worst ages that I've noticed for like youth is like U9 or U8 to like U12. So where I'm going with this is I've always told tournaments, I'm like, look, especially at those age groups, you need to have a field marshal or somebody that can control the sideline because the stuff that parents will say and do, whether it's to kids, to the coach, to the parents, is unbelievable. So we using the same tournament that I was at last weekend, they did have one guy, and he had to walk amongst. He was a referee. I don't know what his title was or his level was or whatever, but he would walk around the different games. And it's a big complex. We had 20 fields there, give or take. So he had to walk from game to game, and I'm like, that's a good start. But if you had, let's say, one guy for four fields, you would probably stop a lot of the abuse, a lot of the negative comments or the crazy things that happen just because the guy can be there being like, hey, listen, this is unacceptable behavior. If you continue, we're going to remove you from the game, and the game will not continue until this has been completed or whatever. And but I understand that's a hard thing to do because you have to pay that person. So tournaments are going, oh, I don't want to make that cost because that drops my bottom line. So, but I think that has to be addressed or at least looked at because if we don't start addressing those things, we're going to continue to have referee shortages. You're going to continue to have kids quitting playing the game. Like, I'll be completely transparent with you. One of the things that I've been considering is, do I really still want to even coach youth anymore? I'll still train, but do the coaching aspect. Like, I'm like, dude, like the way that parents behave, it's to me, it's unbelievable, and it's just like, it's not fun. It's not rewarding anymore because like it's all negative stuff that happens basically 24/7. And I'm the coach, so I can only imagine being a referee to do that. And I just think that's something. I don't know if you agree with that, but I would love your input if you think that would help maybe negate that aspect.
Yeah, the referee coordinator aspect, or that person that's there, watching, is really to cover the matches, to make sure that the
Mm,
matches are covered, or if there's injuries, that's really their key thing, is to make sure that each match is covered. The secondary thing is dealing with issues. But when you, like you said, if you have a 20 field complex, by the time you get to one situation, you're already called to a next, and it's already dissipated or it's already happened. So,
right.
I think it's difficult. I think the policing has to be within the team. And you're right where, there's a conflict of interest. When a referee tells a coach, "Hey, calm down the sideline," I know there's a clear conflict of interest because at the end of the day, those are the parents that are sending their kids to play with you. They're the
Yep.
ones that are paying. And for
Mm-hmm.
you to tell somebody to go be quiet, I know that's not as easy thing to do. And I think the referees and the coaches are so similar. It's so similar. Everything that the coaches have to deal with, the referees also have to
Right.
deal with. I think working together, I think that's the only way to do it on the field. Administrators that go out there, some people have security. At the end of the day, it really has to boil down to the community really taking charge and saying, you know what, we want a culture change. I see traumatic games, not only for the referees and the coaches, for the players.
Right, the
Traumatic
kids.
games that they don't want to play anymore because my dad yells every time I go.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's something that people need to be aware that it's not just about complaining a call to a referee or
Hmm.
saying to the coach, "Why didn't you play my kid?" What is that young mind or that player, how what experience are they getting? And at the end of the day, when they become adults, let's say in youth, when they become adults, are they going to really want to be part of the game when they saw this craziness on the field? So
Hmm.
I think it's an everybody problem. It's not just one or the other. I think everybody needs to come together.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you said that because I've always said, and I've talked to many parents, and I've always, like, anytime a parent asks me, and I've given this advice online on my content, I'm like, look, the parents that set their kids up for the greatest amount of success are the ones that barely speak, like the ones that don't talk. And I'll give you an example. So I was fortunate enough to have Roberto Carlos's nephew in our program for 3 years, and he came out to one tournament. And I'm watching this guy. He was watching his daughter play first. It was a futsal tournament, and then so I'm watching from the sideline, and he's quiet. He's sitting there smiling, clapping like this, and I'm going, dude, if this is Roberto Carlos, World Cup winner, whatever else accolades he's won, probably the best left back of all time, and he would have a right to go up to anybody and be like, dude, this is wrong. This is wrong. Kid, you need to correct this. Like, I think you get the point. And it's like, he's just sitting there smiling, waving, clapping. So then we get to his nephew's game. So he's sitting on our bench. And I'm like, I looked at him like, yo, Roberto, if you want to say so, I didn't actually say this, but I'm like looking at him like, dude, if you want to speak, I'll sit down and let you coach. Like, cool, no problem. Jokingly, but like, again, I'm watching him. He's just, dude, smiling, clapping, waving. He's not saying a word. Yet we have parents on the sideline berating kids that have never touched the ball in their life. And where I'm going with this is I've helped frame some people to understand that when you actually let the kid play and enjoy the game and make mistakes, let the coach make mistakes, let the referee make mistakes, and let the kid make mistakes, understand that that's a part of the game and a part of the process. We don't have VAR, and we'll get to VAR in a second, but VAR makes mistakes. So it's like it's human error. It's going to happen. And at this age, especially younger ages, it doesn't matter. Nobody wins a World Cup or gets a college scholarship or signs a professional contract at anything under basically 15 years old. There might be a rare exception outside of the rule where a 13-year-old does it or whatever it is, but it's like it really doesn't matter. Does it make you feel good? Okay, sure. But at the end of the day, we want kids playing the game. We want them enjoying the game, at least from my perspective. And it's like we're taking that away from them to have that freedom and privilege.
Yeah, I think I see it with parents and even my kids in school. Everybody wants their kid to be perfect.
Mm,
And if they're not perfect, you're the person that is supposed to take care of them and
right?
make them perfect. And I think that transcends into the field, right? I like, the like you said, the parents that let the kid have the experience and then later on have reflection on what just happened. I think that's the key to growth. Not just expecting you to become the best from the moment that you step on the field, because
Right?
that's not reality,
Mm,
right? But I think you hit it on the nail where it's something that I'm glad you're bringing awareness to in this podcast, and we can talk about what are the best practices, and I think it is we need to police ourselves.
mm,
We cannot expect somebody else to say you're out of line. There should be a person there to calm people down and help out. Maybe something that they could do is have a monitor there, and there's a manager for every team. They have the training that they're supposed to have. They have the safe sport concussion
right?
training, and there should be a training for this, specifically for this, to grow the game. It's not about the referee's still going to make mistakes. That's never going to end,
Yep.
right? And it's up to everybody's perspective, so that can change from one team to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Little Johnny's always going to miss the shot, so you can't make that 100% perfect. And
Nope.
the game is perfectly imperfect, and that's how it should be. And we're going to talk a little bit, I know, about VAR, And the nuisance is when you really want to make something perfect. Soccer's never going to be perfect.
Nope.
That's the fun of soccer, of not knowing who's going to win and what's going to happen.
Yeah, the outcome of it. So, since you said you're a dad, do your kids play?
Yeah, they played this year. It's been 2 seasons.
Hmm.
I have a 7-year old and a 10-year old, and they're playing AYSO. And I just wanted to go watch them, right? And at the end of the day, I'm coaching both teams.
There you go. So, if you weren't coaching, how would you behave as a dad with all the experience that you have as a ref and your life in the game? How would you behave on the sideline if you were a parent watching your child play? I would love to know your perspective.
I got to see them once, and in that game, the coach got thrown out. And that's why I became the coach because I mean I'm an administrator, right? Not with AYSO, but I went up to the referees and I told them, "Hey, you guys are right. We're gonna get the guy out." Even though whatever I thought was right or not, it didn't matter.
Mm,
I went over there and I know that if I say, "Hey, this should have happened," they're gonna be defensive, right? So I went up. I said, "Hey, you guys are right. We're gonna make sure the guy leaves. Can we continue playing? I'm an administrator. I have all the licenses that you need, coaching and everything." And they decided not to play the game, right? And
mm,
I understand them. It's the rules that they're gonna take. But at the end of the day, I was sitting there and I was like, "Wow, this is actually happening," right? And at the end, I was asked to be the coach because there was nobody else to take on the team.
mm.
um During the whole season nobody said anything because they knew I was a referee, I guess. And they were like, you know what, we can't complain about everything. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, I wanted them to have the experience. I wanted my kids to have the experience. I was just gonna sit and watch. If they missed a goal, they missed a goal. And if they scored, I'd be ecstatic. I'd be the first one, ecstatic about the goal. And at the end, talking to the kids, to me, you had this play. What do you think? And let them talk instead of us just badgering them.
Right. So you wouldn't be on the sideline with your controller in hand joysticking. You'd let them enjoy it.
Right, as a parent. But then when I became a coach, that was a little bit difficult to take because, I'm used to a different type of soccer,
Right.
and the referees are not trained in that way. So I had to bite my lip many times on the sideline because
Yeah.
I know I'm representing. So if I say something, that everybody's going to follow, and at the
Right.
end, it's a domino effect, right? And it's a spiral. So, before the game, I would thank them. I actually had coins that I would give them,
Mm.
and that to me goes a lot farther than going out there and complaining and using that as a tactic to get your way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, you bring up earlier about the referee courses. I would love to kind of dive into this because probably about a year ago, maybe 8 months, a year ago. So I mentioned that I was a referee previously, and I considered redoing my license, at least to do grassroots like U9 and U10 or whatever, because I got an email, I think, at one point that FYSA or just Florida youth soccer in general was short on refs. So I went to go do it. I talked to a buddy of mine that's he was an assigner. I'm like, hey, what do I need to do to get back into it? I was like, I haven't refed in probably as officially ref with a license in probably 10 years. And he's like, okay, well, you have to do the online course. And then he's like, you also have to do a 3 hour in person thing. And I'm like, dude, I'm out. I'm not going to drive an hour and a half to go to first do the online portion. Okay, cool, do that, no problem. But then go do it and drive an hour and a half one way for a 3 hour in person course. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to do that. So is that something that SoCal has as well, or is that just our state? And what is your opinion on the actual referee process to be certified?
Yeah, it's actually each state certifies through the requirements of U.S. Soccer. So
Hmm.
those requirements are from U.S. Soccer, and but each state can actually add requirements, not take away. So
Well,
that's the basic. You do a 4-hour course online,
hmm.
then you do Safe Sport, which is 90 minutes. Then you do
Sure.
concussion and sudden cardiac arrest training, which is another whatever 90 minutes. And then at the end, when you complete that, you do an in person. So it could be a good 8 to 9 hour ordeal.
Right.
What we've done here in Southern California is those in persons. We've given people the option to do a virtual, and you have a live instructor. It's similar like you would on the field, and they're there doing a virtual session, and you're working on mechanics. The same things that we're trying to get it as close as you can to live, like when you're
Hmm.
live. But giving people that option, I think, is positive because there's people like in Southern California. from the south part to the north part, it's a 5 hour drive.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's and we don't have courses every single weekend in every single area. So
Right.
I think the virtual option helps people that are too far away. You're never going to get as good as live, but
Yeah.
we're trying to strive towards that, right? And having people give them options. Somebody like you that's played the game so many years and has refereed before in the past, I don't think they should be taking that new course.
Right.
And sometimes we waive for some specific people that have already refereed before and they're just trying to get back into it because those courses are more generated for the ones that have never refereed before.
Yeah. The newcomer.
Right.
Right. Well, and that's the thing I told my friend. I said, dude, like, I was like, I'm not here to be a full-time ref. I don't need to do this. I'm like, I know you guys need refs, so I'm willing to help out. But if I got to do all this extra work, I'm out. So he's like, yeah, I understand. So I find it interesting because I think for a new ref, I think it's good. I think it's a good process. But then you got guys like me, or maybe even higher level than me, or whatever, that maybe want to just do it to help out on a weekend. Maybe they want to help their kid make sure they can have a game on Saturday. And that's why I was doing it because the organization that I work with, we're small, bro. We only have I think 9 teams, so we're not having a lot of games, which means we don't get access to a lot of referees. So I try not to coach very much anymore in terms of like managing games and stuff. So I could go ref games on a Saturday or whatever, but I can't because I'm not licensed anymore. So I just found that very interesting because I'm like, there's probably some people that would consider doing this but can't because they don't want to go through the process. It's too many hoops, in my opinion, to jump through for guys that have experience. So I appreciate the feedback on that. But I think for new guys, I think it's necessary.
Yeah, and I have good communication with the state referee administrator of Florida, so
Mm,
I'll nudge her arm a little bit
right?
and ask her, hey, maybe a virtual option would be good because if you could do it from the comfort of your home, I mean, you would be probably more reluctant to do it,
You'd have I might consider doing that because I don't have to leave my house. But
right?
the only course that was available for me was an hour and a half, and he's like, "Yeah, you got to go there. You have to pay for that, and then you got to spend your time and then pay for the travel." I'm like, "Dude, it's not worth it. Like, I'm just trying to help. I'm not here because I need to do this. I'm doing it because I want to help out." So I just found that very interesting. So next question, I want to figure out or at least discuss with you. One of the things that I have noticed, and I don't know if you've seen the same thing or at least get your feedback on it. I have noticed really two things. Youth referees struggle managing the flow of the game, and then as well, they struggle with dealing. Uh, I don't know if dealing is the right word, but like figuring out that contact is a part of the game, but what is legal and what's not legal. So I'm not saying that I have every answer. There's probably times that I'm wrong, but I see a lot of stuff where you'll see this. Like the guy pulls the shirt briefly, like for like, I mean, a millisecond, like grabs it for a second, lets it go. Referee calls a foul, yellow card. And I'm like, dude, we're in 2 minutes of the game. Guy grabs a shirt like this, and you're going to stop the game on a foul and give a yellow card. So I'm just curious from your feedback if you've noticed the same type of thing, or how do we deal with that?
I think it's to me one of the factors is in this country different to other countries. Referees can on a Saturday work a U9 match and then later on do a college match and then the next day do a high school match.
Right?
And there's a variety of different styles of play and culture within that and within
Mm,
those three matches, right? And I think referees sometimes call what they want and not what people need, and I think that's what we try to teach as well is that call what's expected for that level,
mm,
right? There's if you do a U9 match, maybe they're not as balanced, not as skilled,
yeah.
and maybe a small little contact is gonna get them off the ball. And that's a foul for their level. But then you go to a college match and they're everybody's fit, everybody's strong, everybody can play through contact, and then you allow them to because that's what's expected. I think
Right.
the issue that we have most is what people call consistency, where you
Agreed.
call one thing for one person, and then for the other thing, for the other team, you don't call it. And
Hmm.
I think that's where I see most of the issues is a lack of consistency. But I've put my finger on it. I don't think it's a lack of consistency because every play is a little bit different. I
Right.
think what people complain about is balance. Where if you call something on this side, people are expecting you to call something on the other side, and that kind of keeps everybody's frustration levels down.
Yeah.
And I think if you're fair and you balance the match, and it's part of managing it, right? It's part of
Right.
managing it through fouls and misconduct, but also with your personality. I think that's a key factor as well. But I think those are some of the factors that we have. And at the end, I think people really get upset about consistency. But every call, every decision is different. Nothing's exactly the same. So to me, it's more of a balance issue.
Well, I would say on the note of using consistency, you know, I'm a coach, so if I see a foul given against me, I would expect the same call against them. And I think maybe that's what you're talking about. It doesn't have to be the exact same, but a similar idea, similar principle, similar philosophy, or whatever. And I think that gets missed out a lot because it's like sometimes you see stuff and you're like, well, if you call this, then you got to call it the same type of foul the other way, and that might be what you're referencing towards. And that for me is definitely an issue that I see, and I think that might be where I'm going with the flow, where they call one thing and you're like, well, then if you're going to call this and whatever it was, it doesn't have to be major, it could be major, minor, whatever it is, then you should reciprocate that on the other side, both ways. And as long as you do that, I think you're going to be okay. And that might be the consistency piece or that aspect you were talking about.
Yeah, there's sometimes, and people are not aware of this. There's flashpoint areas
Mm,
where a referee will lower his bar of a foul because of the area of the field,
sure.
or heighten the bar of the foul because it's in the penalty area and it has to be 1,000% PK. So I think that's something that people are not as aware of, and that's where you see the imbalance in consistency. Because for instance, if you have a small contact on the side of the parents where it's going to be a foul for them,
Right.
referees are taught to just call what people expect and call that foul,
Mm,
right? But then it happens in an area where it's not as critical to call that contact. They might let it go, and that's where you see the inconsistencies. I think referees need to be a little bit more knowledgeable of balancing the situations. You know what I mean?
mm,
And looking for things that benefit and are are a better management tool for the game.
right. Well, so let me ask you this. And, you watch like professional games, and usually you don't see a yellow card in the first 10 minutes unless it's something ridiculous. Right, but then you'll see youth matches, and then the first foul of the game, and it could be like minor, like almost nothing, yellow card. How do we? And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be yellow card, or maybe it should be. But like you watch professional games or higher level games, and there's no yellow card right away. How can we help referees? I would call that flow. I don't know where you would use that to describe that kind of element. But how would we help youth referees from your experience to like, hey, you don't have to give the yellow card. You called the foul. It's okay. Just be on top of that one. Is it that? Is it like getting on top of them quickly to like nip it in the bud, or how do we deal with that better?
Yeah, I think it has to do with management and your experience level.
Hmm.
And you have a wide range of referees that work your match. They're not going to be all the same. Some
Right.
will have more experience. When you have more experience, you take a little bit of a risk because you know that you can control the match no matter what happens.
Right.
But when you're a younger referee or don't have much experience, you're not taking any risk, and everything you're doing, you're going to do it exactly of the letter of the law.
Right.
And I think you need more of a stepped approach rather than just going directly to a card. You got to
Hmm.
use all of your, we call it toolbox, which is it incorporates your personality. It incorporates calling the player over, talking to him first. It's exhausting every resort before you go to misconduct, because
Hmm.
that's the way people are gonna. Because if you do a stepped approach, let's say you talk to the player, and then he does it again, everybody's going to be like, well, that person was talked to. And, the referee did his job. And it's not so much on the referee anymore. Now it's on the player. So I
Right.
think there needs to be more of a stepped approach in every game, not just in the youth level. I see it also in MLS. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about VAR, but,
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities. There's so many opportunities to control the match and get people on your side, but sometimes we fail to recognize them.
Well, I think that goes back to your point about the human approach, right? It's like if you go and have that conversation, I don't know specifically what you would say at that level, but hey, saw that, don't do that again. If you do it again, yellow card. Then you put it, like you said, on the player that if you make that same mistake, you're getting a card. So I think, that would probably be a good way to handle that. But I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think a lot of times in youth and pro, they're probably quick to pull the trigger on the card, and maybe they feel like that's the best way to control the match. But again, I'm on your boat. I think it's better to say, hey, let's take the step approach and have the conversation first. If they continue, okay, then you got to brandish the card. But I think, especially now in current climate, I think we're too quick to give a card when it might not be the best step.
Yeah, I think it's just it's lack of experience
Mm.
and a lack of management. And look, when I was younger too, and I wouldn't take a risk, right? And I was in those Hispanic leagues where
Yeah,
you
yeah.
couldn't take a risk
No, no, that's different.
because if not, people would fight. So
Right,
some might have that experience as well, or some might have traumatic incidents where the game went south, and now they're trying to stay on top of it. I think referees need to have mentors or experienced referees, especially the young ones, that work with them and tell them, "Hey, it's okay. You can take a risk here as long as it's not violent, where it's breaking somebody's leg or it's an elbow to the face. Everything else is really you can manage it and do a step approach, and that can actually calm things down and frustrations. Hey, you have every tool necessary. You can call the captain over, hey, this player's already done this. The next time he's going to get a card. You can make it a show where everybody knows, okay, give all the opportunities for that person to change their behavior.
right. That would definitely help. So, using that note, I have a question for you. This is how I do it. So, like, I've had 9-year-olds get red cards, and I don't agree with that unless it's violent conduct, right? Unless they're
Right.
purposely swinging at somebody or trying to you just obviously they don't necessarily know what they're doing, but they're swinging in some way. So I had a kid personally that for his age, crazy aggressive, and when I mean crazy aggressive, he was bigger than everybody else, so he was able to knock people over. That's kind of what it was, and he probably got 4 red cards in a year. And I would always tell the referee after the game, after it happened, I'd be like, look, I understand that you have to, again, probably control the match or whatever. If you want to give a 9-year-old a red card, just tell me and I will take him off.
Exactly.
It's okay. Like, it's no problem. Like, I won't put him back in. Maybe other coaches will. I don't know. But, and I've been able to do that one time where I've saved the kid from a red card, but 4 other times I'm like, look, dude, like, I don't think you realize, the potential repercussions you're making on this kid. He doesn't, you made the comment that they don't have the same balance. They don't know how to use their body yet. They don't know how to control themselves. So I think experience helps. But, for a kid to get at 9 years old or 8 years old, whatever age he was U9, to get 4 red cards in a year, I'm like, dude, just tell me, I'll take him off. Is that something you would agree with, and or how would you approach that?
Yeah, I think that's part of exhausting every measure possible.
Hmm.
And especially if you feel as a referee that things are not safe and he is committing things that are a problem. Being proactive, like you said, and talking to the coach. Hey, can you help me with this player?
Right,
Make it a working together instead of I'm making a decision and you got to stick with it. I think that's key, not just in that, but in every aspect of the game, is making it seem like we're invested together to try to have a safe environment.
right. Yeah, that makes a fair point. It's just interesting because it's like whenever I saw a red card for a 9-year-old, I'm like, dude, like they're 9, they don't understand what they're doing, they don't understand their body. And I told the ref once, I'm like, look, I would understand a red card if the kid came up and swung. I'm like, okay, that's a red card. There's not even a question about it. He probably has some idea what he's doing, but when there's contact, I'm like, could it be slightly hard and aggressive? Yeah, okay. But to give him a red, I'm like, it's just unnecessary.